more than the NFL draft. And no draft gets higher ratings than the NFL draft. Millions, tens of millions of people are going to watch Roger Goodell walk up to the stage, get booed, first off, up in Detroit, and then read 32 names off of a piece of paper tonight. Hindsight, that sounds ridiculous, right? Like, why is that so popular? But it shows how football obsessed we are as a society. And I'm going to be tuning in. I'm watching the whole thing. I'm interested, and probably a lot of you are as well. As I just mentioned a moment ago, most of the mock drafts are not even going to get close to half of their picks right. But one thing that I think we can definitively all agree on is that Caleb Williams is going to go number 1 overall tonight. Like, there is a 99.999999% chance he's going to be a Chicago Bear, and a very, very, very slim margin or slim opportunity for anything else to happen at that number 1 spot. The Bears haven't even been shy about it. Like, they've not outright said it, because no team's going to outright say leading up to the process, like, hey, we're going to take this guy number 1 overall. But they've said it without saying it, if that's if you can understand it that way. So we know it's going to happen. He's been touted as a generational talent, the best thing since Andrew Luck, all that kind of stuff. Is that believable? I don't know. We'll see. I think he's going into a decent situation. Now, a lot of the times when you're the number 1 overall pick in the draft, that means you're going to the worst team, like the team that finished with the worst record in the NFL a season ago, and you're probably going into a place that has a pretty bare covered for the most part. This is a different situation because, of course, the Bears have the pick that would normally belong to the Carolina Panthers, who sucked again this past year. But because of that trade a season ago, the Bears now have the number 1 and the number 9 pick that they would have based on their overall record. So they're not in as bad a shape as most teams that end up picking number 1 overall in the NFL draft, particularly when you look at their offensive situation. So DJ Moore, who again was involved in that trade a season ago that allowed the Bears to have this number 1 overall pick. DJ Moore's there, leading receiver a season ago. Cole Kmet, good tight end, another option for them on offense. Their offensive line has been banged up this past season, so it certainly could be better if everybody's able to stay healthy. And they have the number 9 pick in the draft as well, as I just mentioned a moment ago. So you're going to be able to get Caleb Williams at number 1 and very likely pick up a very good wide receiver as well. Projections maybe like a Rome Odunze at that number 9 pick to add another piece to that offense. So Caleb Williams going into a pretty decent situation overall, it seems like, in Chicago, again, compared to what, again, like Bryce Young went into with the Carolina Panthers a season ago. And it's really interesting because this is a very quarterback-heavy first round or around the first round type of draft. We're going to see a lot of names getting called at the quarterback spot very, very early on. Again, Caleb Williams going to be the headliner there. There's a debate of, okay, is it Jaden Daniels or Drake May going number 2 to the Washington Commanders? McCarthy projected to be somewhere in the top half of the first round of the draft. You got guys like Nix, Penix, Spencer Rattler expected to be a mid-round guy. We'll get him a little bit later, but a lot of options at quarterback that are going to be selected early on in this draft that are expected to come in and be basically starters right away for the most part. And again, leading up to the draft process, everybody talks about the accolades of what these guys can do, what they can bring to these respective organizations, and how great they're going to be. I was listening to Pete Prisco of CBS Sports last night talking about his latest mock draft where he thought guys were going to be going. And particularly when talking about quarterbacks, he said something that really stuck out to me. They kind of based on the average of how drafts go and how things project forward with individual careers, especially or particularly when talking about quarterbacks, that in a draft where let's say 5 quarterbacks are going to get taken in the first round. One of them ends up being a great player. One of them ends up being okay. One ends up being a backup and 2 end up being bust. And it's not necessarily in that order either. So it's not saying, well, Caleb Williams is going to be the superstar. Jaden Daniels is going to be okay. Drake May's going to be the bust. McCarthy's going to be, or Drake May's going to be the backup. McCarthy's going to be a bust, and Bo Nix is going to be a bust. Doesn't exactly work in that order. It all has to do, obviously, with the player themselves and what skill set they bring to the next level and how it translates over, how good they can develop as an NFL quarterback, but also the situation they go into. Because you can be the most talented quarterback in the world, but if you don't have, for one, a good coaching staff that can get the most out of you, and two, have those pieces around you on offense and defense as well to actually give you a fighting chance in games, you may not last. Bryce Young could, again, number 1 overall pick a year ago. Bryce Young might be the most talented quarterback we've seen in the past 10 years, but he could get chewed up and spit out of the NFL in 3-4 years' time if the Panthers as a whole don't make the situation around him better. And again, they're in a tough spot this year because they don't even have a first-round pick. But it's not solely dependent on the player themselves. It really is about the situation that they go into that can really make or break what their career is going to be. And when you look at these projections for, where these guys are being projected to go, again, we know Caleb Williams is going to the Bears. Doesn't seem like a terrible situation. Jaden Daniels probably going to go to the Washington Commanders. Seems decent to okay. Feel like there could be success there. Drake May possibly at number 3 to the New England Patriots. That's what the concern comes in because the cupboard's very bare there. You know what I mean? Obviously, you're basically restarting your franchise with Jared Mayo taking over as the head coach. Bill Belichick's moved on, and Bill Belichick didn't leave it in a good place. There's a reason they have the number 3 overall pick. Now, is Drake May, can he elevate those guys around him? We don't know. And again, it's one of those things that if he were going number 1 overall to the Bears, his career could be better 5 years from now, as opposed to going to a place like New England. It's such an imperfect science. And we love to look back on guys that end up being bust years down the line and say, well, that guy was a total failure in the NFL. And part of that could lie in their individual hands, but it also could just be the organization they go to and the talent that they have around him or lack thereof that determine how successful they can truly be at the next level of the NFL. Going to be very interesting to see how this plays out for these guys. Speaking of quarterbacks, again, our eyes are going to be on what happens with Spencer Rattler over the course of this weekend. There's absolutely no doubt in anyone's mind he's going to be the highest drafted South Carolina quarterback in program history, which that is going to hopefully do wonders for South Carolina in terms of recruiting, especially at quarterback over these next couple of years to be able to say, hey, Spencer Rattler, who, by the way, go back a couple of years ago, he was not, when he came to South Carolina, he was looked at as damaged goods in a lot of people's eyes. That he had lost his job at Oklahoma, had fallen out of a lot of favor in people's eyes as far as his projections to the next level and all that kind of stuff. Now, we thought when he came to South Carolina, he was going to, just fix it all in 1 year and then be gone to the NFL draft. That didn't end up happening, but he's obviously done a very good job this past season, making the most of his opportunity and getting himself back to being at least projected to be one of those mid-round guys, which is where we expect him to go, at earliest sometime tomorrow night in the second or third round of the, of the NFL draft. We'll get to this coming up next, but Jake Crane of Daily Wire Sports, I thought had a very good and detailed, thought out, idea thought of Spencer Rattler and how his time here at South Carolina and his college career as a whole has molded him to be a pro-ready quarterback that is going to be drafted this upcoming weekend. We will get to that coming up. You're listening to The Extra Point. It's our head along with you. As always, you can check us out on the Game TV, sponsored by our friends at Shepherd's Glass and powered by our friends over at Integrated Media. Also listen to us on the 107.5 The Game app. Just go to the App Store, the iTunes Store, the Google Play Store, and give us a download. Take us with you wherever you go. Talk about Spencer Rattler and his future at the NFL level and how he got to this point. Coming up next, it is The Extra Point. It's our head along with you here on The Game. Welcome back in. It's the Extra Points Outhead with you on this Thursday morning draft day. Excited to see the 32 picks coming up tonight in the NFL draft and the what the city of Detroit looks like for the NFL draft. That's an interesting thing about this is the NFL draft has become this like traveling show now, where for years it was in New York at the Radio City Music Hall, I think it was, and it was kind of in one set location. And of course, the NFL, printing money the way that they do, eventually realized that, hey, if we take this show on the road, we can make even more money and we can sell out bigger venues and we can, flood the streets of Nashville like they did a couple years ago and really turn this into an even bigger event than it already is. So the NFL draft has become a road show now, and Detroit being the latest city to get to host that tonight. And I did see some funny things about the city of Detroit, which is, largely thought of to not be the best city in America by any means, but they seem to have cleaned up things a little bit with the anticipation of the crowd coming for the NFL draft, this upcoming weekend. As I mentioned, Spencer Rattler will not be getting drafted tonight. At best, we'll be getting his name called sometime tomorrow in either the second or third round, which, again, is going to be the best we've ever seen from a South Carolina quarterback, which, again, should hopefully pay dividends for this program going forward in terms of recruiting and just overall being able to sell, hey, you can come here and be like what Spencer Rattler was, and hopefully he goes on and has a long pro career that, we can certainly all be proud of here at South Carolina. His story to get to this point is so interesting, though, and the perception of him and how it's changed over time. And as I mentioned before the break, Jake Crane of Daily Wire Sports, who's been a big fan of Spencer Rattler, and I remember I played a clip of him way back in the middle of the season when this team was struggling with the offensive line and stuff like that, and he was, at that point in time, hyping up Spencer Rattler for overcoming the adversity he was dealing with during that season. And in that same vein, he talks about Spencer Rattler and what he's dealt with in his college career that's kind of molded him into the pro-ready quarterback that he's getting ready to be with whoever ends up drafting him this upcoming weekend.
But I think what separates Spencer Rattler in the grand scheme of things is his growth off the field. To be honest, I wasn't a fan of the way he acted out of high school and while he was at Oklahoma. He seemed to be a prisoner of the moment, and he would dictate his leadership on whether it was going good or whether it was going bad. He seemed like more of a me guy than a we guy. And we know that a lot of young people are like that, but not all young people can change. And ever since his transfer to Coach Beamer in South Carolina, he's not only handled adversity, he's overcome it. Now, you could make the argument that he was one of the most important individuals to his team's success in the country, and not just because he played quarterback. Now, he could have shut it down or made excuses with no protection or a bad run game, but that's not what he did. He led. He took the blame, and you could see it on the field as well. He knew when to get on a guy, and he knew when to tell someone to keep their head up. There's a big difference. Now, a lot of guys act like great leaders, but deep down they really aren't when the cameras and coaches aren't around. We all know those guys. Some are natural-born leaders, and that's great. But to me, the best leaders are the guys who transform into it. And that's what Spencer Rattler has done. And when a guy has his ability physically and a newfound mental makeup, they can be awfully dangerous on Sundays, no matter where they get picked.
And he's 100% right. Wherever Spencer Rattler ends up going and whatever situation he ends up finding himself in the NFL, I don't think there's any doubt in anybody's mind, especially here locally, that he's going to be able to handle that situation. And he's got the right frame of mind and a good head on his shoulders to hopefully be successful for a long time to come to the NFL. And as Jake mentioned there, the Spencer Rattler that came out of high school as a 5-star and was projected to be one of the top picks in the NFL draft is a big difference than the Spencer Rattler that is leaving college. And he had the ups and downs at Oklahoma, where, again, people forget, going into the 2021 season, he was projected to be like the #1 overall pick. He was projected to win the Heisman Trophy and one of the best odds in the entire nation to do that. And halfway through the season, he gets benched. And some guys can't handle that. As Jake mentioned, up to that point, he'd been the emotions had been up and down in his time at Oklahoma. And, coming to South Carolina, again, with the thought that, all right, he's going to come here for 1 year, he's going to ball out and go to the NFL. And that didn't work out. the way that everybody thought it was going to, or the way that he probably hoped it was going to. So he comes back for another year. All that's molded him into being a better overall, not only player, but a better overall person. And we've talked so many times about the stupid Netflix thing from when he was in high school that people still like to point fingers at. That's not him. That's not who he is. Much better person, much better player. And those experiences that he's had in college have molded him into being that. And I think, again, we're all very excited to see where he's going to go and what he's going to be at the next level. Spencer Rattler himself, cut number 2 here, Dave, from today's list. Spencer Rattler himself was on the desk of the NFL Network a couple of weeks ago in the lead up to the draft coming up this weekend. And he himself talked about, wanting to go, as high as he can.
I want to go as high as I can. That's everybody's goal. Feel like I'm a top 4 or 5 quarterback in this class for sure. Been showing it throughout this process, but at the end of the day, not everybody can start their first year coming into the league. You look at guys like Mahomes, Kirk Cousins, other guys like that have started as backups, and now you see they're flourishing now. So whatever situation I end up in, I'm going to be fully prepared, work my tail off, and learn from the guy ahead of me.
And he's 100% right that, you don't have to go in and be a day one starter to be successful in the NFL. As he mentioned, a handful of quarterbacks there that were not drafted with that intention, but had the opportunity to sit and mold and kind of marinate in whatever system they ended up being in, to when it was time for their number to be called, they were better off because they weren't thrown to the wolves on day number 1. And I myself, just personally, I don't like having to try out a true rookie quarterback unless you just have no other option. And there are teams that don't have any other option. I'm a Falcons fan in 2008. The Atlanta Falcons had no other option but to start Matt Ryan in game number 1 of his NFL career, and that ended up working out great. And I think he's a Hall of Famer, deserves to be so. Probably not going to end up being that because he didn't win that Super Bowl a couple years ago. But sometimes you have no other option, and it does end up working out. And sometimes guys aren't ready. Sometimes guys need that little bit of extra development, need that extra time to figure out how to be an NFL quarterback to truly end up being successful at the at the next level. And Spencer Rattler, I think, would benefit the most from going in and sitting behind somebody for maybe a year or two and getting up to speed with the NFL game, and then potentially taking over the reins in a couple years' time. And again, that all depends on which team picks him up, what situation is, what their quarterback's contract situation, all that kind of stuff. So there are a myriad of options where it's impossible to sit here and accurately predict what exactly is going to happen and where exactly he's going to go. But again, we expect him to be drafted somewhere in this late second, or some late second, maybe third round, possibly even fourth, depending on what draft projections you're looking at. Again, that really just depends on what teams are looking for and needing around that time in the NFL draft and who's already been selected and all that kind of stuff. So, again, very imperfect science to sit here and try and accurately predict where exactly he's going to go. He did say one thing there that stuck out to me, and this isn't really a big deal. And, again, he's talking to the NFL Network desk. This isn't like he's in a team interview or anything like that. But he says, I think I'm a top 4 or 5 quarterback, in this draft class. Which he's right. Nobody's sitting here and saying that Spencer Rattler should be the number 1 overall pick or even be a first-round pick. But at the same time, wouldn't you want to hear him say that he thinks he's the best quarterback available? And again, maybe that's nitpicking, but just that's something that stuck out to me. From a self-confidence standpoint, shouldn't you always be saying that you're the best? Whether that's true or not. If you're a 7th round projected quarterback and people ask you, hey, what do you think of your aspirations at the next level? And you say, I'm the best. Yeah, people might laugh at you, but from a self-confidence standpoint and a self-belief in yourself, then that's what you should say. Terry and I were talking about this a little bit earlier, that Joe Flacco years and years ago was asked if he thought he was the best quarterback in the NFL. And he said, yeah, people clowned him for it, but I get it 100%. That's what you want them to say, right? What's he supposed to say? I think I'm 6th or 7th. No, you should think you're the best. And that mindset hopefully translates onto the field as well. And again, I'm not dogging Spencer Rattler for that, but it's just something that kind of stuck out to me from, that specific quote that, I would have liked to have heard him say that he thinks he's the best option. Again, whether that's true or not, which, again, we know it's not, but, hearing that self-confidence is always a good thing, in my opinion. Maybe think differently. That's okay. We'll continue on with the draft conversation. Xavier Legette is potentially going to get his name called tonight. We'll get some thoughts on him, hear from one of the best wide receivers to ever do it, who give a very thorough breakdown on what Xavier Legette brings to the next level and whatever team ends up drafting him. Real quick, though, I want to remind you, as always, Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway rolls on to another series this weekend as the Gamecocks get set to take on the Kentucky Wildcats. $1,000 up for grabs if a Gamecock hitter hits Grand Slam in game number 1. $25 gets added to the pot each and every game this season as that pot continues to grow. Hopefully, we get that Grand Slam here soon, and one of you can be the lucky recipient of all that money. Head online to 1075thegame.com and register for your chance to win the Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway. Xavier Legette, will he get his name called tonight? We'll see. Get some thoughts on that coming up next. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Thursday morning on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Points Outerhead along with you here on this Thursday morning, talking all things NFL draft. And as you just heard there, I was always like to talk hardwood. Thanks to our friends over at Georgia Pacific. We do that each and every Monday, but we can throw some accolades the way of Xavier Legette for the amazing career, or excuse me, the amazing past season he had here at the University of South Carolina. And again, here's a guy that was on nobody's radar going into his senior year here at South Carolina as far as potential at the next level. And you look at his stats over the years, he, had done little of note outside of what happened at the very end of, the 2022 season. He had the kickoff return touchdown against A&M in 2022, but making those big plays in the bowl game that ended up carrying over that momentum into last year, especially when Juice Wells went down. He was able to step up and be the leading receiver for this team. Again, 71 receptions, 1,255 yards, and 7 touchdowns season ago, and truly ended up being one of the best wide receivers in all the SEC, and now is the only Gamecock this year with the opportunity to get his name called in the first round of tonight's NFL draft. We don't know that for sure. He's projected around that anywhere between 28th and maybe 40th, pick area. So it'd be the very end of the first round if he did indeed get picked up. I know the Carolina Panthers have told him, according to him, that if he's available there at 33, which they have the first pick of the second round, then they will end up taking him. So if nothing else, he's not going to have to wait very long tomorrow night to hear his name called. But from a personal standpoint, I would much rather see him get picked up at the end of the first round as opposed to early in the second round by the Carolina Panthers. And look, the Panthers as an organization just not in a great place right now. I don't think the ownership is very good. We'll see what Dave Canales is going to be as a head coach, but it's going to take a while. And I personally, and look, we've had Xavier Legette on the show here before. Great guy, obviously a great player here at South Carolina. We all want to see him succeed, and I'd much rather see him go to a situation like the Kansas City Chiefs, where he's going to be able to work with an amazing generational talent and quarterback in Patrick Mahomes and have the ability to go and win and be successful right away in the NFL, as opposed to maybe toiling with the Carolina Panthers for several years until that team can potentially become good again. And regardless, he's going to the NFL. He's going to make a lot of money, and is hopefully going to end up being a great pro wherever he goes. And I'll just be very excited to hear his name get called at the end of the day. Steve Smith, legendary receiver in his own right, former Carolina Panther too, was talking the other day. He does a really good film breakdown series on YouTube, and he spent one episode talking specifically about Xavier Legette and what value he brings to whatever team ends up drafting him. Cut number 3 here, Dave.
What I'm saying is I'm trying to figure out which Xavier Legette are we getting. Are we getting the 2023 dominant player, or are we going to get the guy who's slowly showing us a few things? And I think that's why some teams, he hasn't in the beginning been an outright guy that says, man, he's a bona fide first-round pick. Now people are starting to, after watching his workout, watching more and more of his film, seeing how fast he ran a 4.39 at the combine. Teams are like, hey, if we get an opportunity to get this guy, and he has a value. He plays special teams, kickoff return, then took a few to the house. So you can't just let that guy go by you if you have the opportunity to draft him and you need a wide receiver, because he's an X-wide receiver. He plays the speed position. You could put him on the line of scrimmage. He could use his speed. He could use his strength to get off the jam. Yes, he gets tied up sometimes, but he's a big, burly kid that can use also his leverage and knows how to use his physicality to get open. And that's key. When you get open, do you use speed, strength, or savviness? Speed gives you separation. Savviness gives you separation. But strength gets you open. And he has all three of those. And that's hard to ignore and say, well, you only had one good year of production at the level of a first-round draft pick.
And he brings up some good points there. And again, Xavier Legette was never not a consistent contributor over the course of his entire long career here at South Carolina. It was the last year that he finally popped and proved to be one of the best receivers in the SEC. So going to the next level, is there going to be I don't want to say similar, but a certain type of acclimation process to playing at the next level? Because again, you are going from playing in the best league in all of college football to now playing with the best players in the entire world when it comes to football. So is there a process of getting up to speed there a little bit as well? We don't know that. We'll have to see when he gets to whatever team obviously ends up drafting him. But I do think it's interesting. And again, we love what Xavier Legette was able to do here. I know there's concerns with maybe some of his abilities when it comes to things like man coverage. I'm just kind of looking at the NFL website, kind of talking about his draft stock. Maybe could improve a little bit with his quickness and breaks in and out. Route running maybe could be a little bit more polished as well. So there's some areas that could be worked on and improved. And I think every team that has him on their radar looks at Xavier Legette and says, like they would with any prospect, and says, all right, well, when we get him in our system, we're going to get him to whatever point they need him to get to be successful at the next level. And again, I have a lot of confidence that Xavier Legette is going to be a very successful wide receiver at the next level. And again, hopefully he goes to a good situation and, that success can start right away. But we're all very excited to see what he's going to be able to bring to the NFL when he does get there. Speaking of wide receivers, I want to hit this one real quick here. Amarian Brown is not projected to be drafted in the NFL draft. He was at Pro Day a while back and went out there and laid down a good 40 time and all that kind of stuff. But if nothing, he's going to be an undrafted free agent. And he was talking with our guy Mike Uva from Gamecock Central the other day. He brought up a very interesting point of how somebody like him might be able to find success in the NFL based on the changes to the NFL's kickoff starting in this year. Cut number 6 here, Dave. Here's what Amarian Brown told Mike Uva of Gamecock Central the other day.
Yeah, so I talked to a few special team coordinators, and whenever I talk to a team, I make sure that I let them know that I'm a returner as well. I want to come in as a returner. I'm going to work on all that. But I brought it up. They've also brought it up as well. A few teams that they think I do pretty well, in that format. And that's just something, that I think that's, getting the ball in my hands, man. Any way possible, just letting me get the ball and go. I think that's a huge plus for me. So I'm super excited about it, man. I think it's going to be fun, not only for me, but for the league in general. I think it's going to be, some new excitement.
I appreciate his self-confidence. Like, he firmly believes that this gives him the ability to be more attractive to NFL teams. Now, again, I don't think he's going to get drafted at the end of the day. I still think he ends up being an undrafted free agent. But he brings up an interesting point that now, and for those that don't remember, the NFL is adopting the XFL style of kickoff, where you basically have the return team and the kickoff coverage team down on the return side of the field, lined up, I think it's 5-10 yards apart, and then you have the return man basically standing on his own. It's basically to prevent the high impact collisions and all that kind of stuff. Also, it's meant to encourage more returns, more explosive plays, all that kind of stuff from the kickoff that's become largely irrelevant in the NFL game these days and has been for the better part of a decade. And it's gotten to the point where you don't really have like true return specialists anymore. Like Devin Hester made a career out of just being a return man. Yes, he was technically a wide receiver and catch balls occasionally, but for the most part, he was there to run kickoffs back and run punts back. And he was amazing at doing that. We all remember when he ran the opening kickoff back in that Super Bowl against the against the Colts. But that kind of player has kind of gone by the wayside just because that level of the game, that part of the game has not been as important as it's been diminished with the changes to kickoff rules for player safety, which I understand. But now that there's been a shift back in favor of wanting more returns, I'm going to be interested to see what teams do in terms of maybe bringing in a guy like an Amarian Brown to say, hey, yeah, you'll be a, 6 wide receiver and we can put you out there on offense some, but your primary job, you're going to be returning kicks because we know that's going to be valuable 4, 5, 6 times a game now as opposed to what it's been. and, returning punts as well, which he did, in a limited role here at South Carolina. So, again, I'm not specifically saying that he's going to go be a superstar in the NFL by doing this, but it's going to be interesting to see if there is a shift maybe back to getting more of these return specialists and stuff like that now that that part of the game has seemingly increased in importance once again, which I'm very excited about seeing that play come back to the NFL. Come back, wrap up today's edition of The Extra Point, and talk a little bit more about Reggie Bush and how his return to the Heisman is another ding on the NCAA's ever-withering resume. With that coming up, it is The Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Thursday morning here on The Game. Welcome back into the Extra Points. Tyler Head with you here on The Game. Coming up next, top 10 o'clock hour, it is the Garnet Trust Hour. We are set to be joined by Monkel Goodwine, the new defensive line transfer for South Carolina, who you saw in action on Saturday night in the spring game, that made a couple good plays, made some sacks as well. So excited to talk to him. He was supposed to be out there with us on Tuesday at Firehouse Subs up there at Killian Crossing, but got called into a last-minute meeting with the defensive line, so we certainly understand. And again, hoping to talk to him here coming up in just a few minutes right here in studio. Reminder, the craft beer card is back. You can spend $30 a brewery at 12 different craft beer locations. It's a $360 value, all yours for just $79. Go online to 1075thegame.com and click on the Sweet Deals tab to purchase the craft beer card. Big news coming out yesterday. In fact, I was on the air in the 9 o'clock hour when the news broke on ESPN, and I reacted to it in real time. But a lot of details have come out about Reggie Bush getting his Heisman Trophy back officially yesterday from the Heisman Trust. But one thing that's kind of flying under the radar is the NCAA's lack of involvement with this. And I want to play a real quick cut here from the Dan Patrick show yesterday. Cut number 4 here, Dave. Here's Dan Patrick detailing a little bit more about the NCAA having nothing to do with Reggie Bush getting his Heisman Trophy back.
Top story of the day. Reggie Bush got his Heisman Trophy back earlier this morning in Florida. Some other Heisman Trophy winners were attending. It was a summit. They were surprised. We talked to correspondent with Eric Crouch, the Nebraska quarterback who won the Heisman. Said they were all surprised that Reggie got it back. Talked to somebody with the Heisman Trust Committee. They said the NCAA had nothing to do with this, that this had been in the works for the last couple of years. Now, there's one thing that does stand out here. The Heisman Trust is changing their own policy of only considering eligible players for the Heisman because according to the NCAA, Reggie Bush was still ineligible to play in those games. Haven't heard anything from the NCAA, and the Heisman Trust Committee said they acted alone, not in conjunction, even though there is a defamation lawsuit pending against the NCAA.
And that's what's interesting about this because, yes, the rules for being able to pay players with NIL came about 3 years ago, which is when the push for Reggie Bush to get his Heisman Trophy back really started to ramp up. And the defense maybe is not the best word, but the reasoning for the Heisman Trust on why they were not doing that yet was the fact that he was still deemed ineligible by the NCAA. So those, like Reggie Bush does not get his records back yet. It may never get his records back at this point. Because the NCAA still deems what he did to be illegal, which, yes, he did receive improper benefits at that time, which was not legal in, the then amateurism model of the NCAA, which, again, has changed a lot. And, they phrase it as pay to play, which is why there's a defamation suit, because it was not really pay to play because he was already at Southern Cal. And, the house and the money and all that kind of stuff that he ended up getting for his family was more in line with, people trying to, put him in position for his NFL future more than anything else than it was to, hey, come play for Southern Cal and all that kind of stuff. Well, that's a whole different conversation. But as insignificant as it may seem, this is a pretty big, chip in the armor to the NCAA that continues to lose power seemingly by the day. And the Reggie Bush lawsuit of defamation is just another on the laundry list of legal battles that the NCAA finds itself immersed in, in addition to these fights with states over individual NILs and individual NIL laws and all that kind of stuff that continue to diminish the power of the organization itself. But I think it's pretty significant that the Heisman Trust and the Heisman Trophy itself basically just gave a middle finger to the NCAA and said, yeah, well, we're going to do our own thing. We don't care if you recognize him as a player or not anymore. Which, by the way, the act of scrubbing the record books when, years after the fact, when details come out or the investigations are complete on things, is pretty silly in my opinion. Like, I to a degree, I understand that they are trying to service some kind of penalty. But to say, well, we're just not going to count what Reggie Bush did, especially for the fact that what he did on the field had nothing to do with the improper benefits that he received. Like, he wasn't taking PEDs or something like this. He accepted benefits. There was the house for his family and all that kind of stuff. But that did not affect his ability on the field. That is not the reason he ran for all those yards and scored all those touchdowns, ran for 9,000 yards that time against San Jose State or anything like that. Like, so to scrub the record books clean of his accomplishments is silly to me. Same thing with taking down banners which that Southern Cal team technically doesn't have that national championship because they took down the banners, right? Or doesn't have one of their national championships because they took down the banners saying, the improper benefits and all that kind of stuff means he was ineligible and all that kind of stuff. We all remember it. We all watched it. We all know what happened. And so to retroactively just say, well, no, it didn't, or we're not going to recognize that, to me is really silly. Will they ever change? I don't know. But it's one of those things the NCAA has consistently always done that I feel like doesn't really have that big of an effect at the end of the day. Regardless, happy that Reggie Bush got his Heisman Trophy back, and hopefully more things can be corrected going forward with the silliness of the NCAA. That'll do it for today's edition of The Extra Point. Again, coming up next, it's the Garnet Trust Hour. We're set to be joined by Monkel Goodwine, new transfer defensive lineman for South Carolina, up next here on The Game.